Ching. I'd like to talk about this fabulous set of songs written by my friend Michael Ching, who is a composer and also a conductor. And actually, I know him first because he has conducted me in several operas.
We were casting a production of The Marriage of Figaro, I believe, at Opera Memphis, where I was the artistic director for 18 years.
You're here today not to talk about Opera Memphis and not to talk about your having been an amazing artistic director nor conductor, but to talk about you as a composer, and in particular about the amazing cycle you have written for the ARK Trio called Arrangements and Derangements, Interpretations of Schubert. So I think maybe we should go back a little bit and first talk about the genesis of the piece. I mean, the ARK Trio, we formed the ARK Trio, Reiko, Kaisa, and I, and then we're suddenly stymied by the fact that it seems that despite the fact that cello, soprano, and piano are pretty standard instruments, that there's almost nothing in the standard repertoire, or even not standard repertoire, composed for that combination of instruments / voice.
Well, they're a perfect combination because the cello and the soprano have fundamentally different ranges. I mean, they overlap, of course, some, but it's nice to have an instrument like a cello that can pretend it's a bass sometimes and then pretend it's a tenor sometimes. And so what better combination is there between tenor and soprano, right? And so it seems like one of those things that I'm surprised that many composers haven't written for.
Right? I mean, we really were stunned when we loved each other as people, and we loved each other as musicians, and we're all mothers of youngish children, school-age children, and it just seemed like a really great fit. And so we went for it before we explored the options for what we might actually play together. And so we quickly realized that we were going to have to reach out to living composers and see if they might grace us with some music.
Well, I'm grateful to you for having done so. When I was in high school, I played for a cellist, and so I learned to love the combination of the cello and the piano. So this was really the first time in, 30, 40 years that I'd ever written anything for the cello as a sort of solo or chamber ensemble instrument. So it was a lovely opportunity to go back to.
One of the quirkiest things you did was in Sei mir gegrüßt, you gave the cello Schubert's melody as opposed to giving it to the singer. And not only did you give the cellist the melody, but you put Schubert's words into the cello part.
So I just try to play as singing, meaning as vocally, as I can. I'm trying to pronounce the words on my cello without the words. And I like being the vocal part. And I enjoy hearing you being crazy.
Totally crazy. Totally crazy. This one is really deranged. I think he named it aptly for this piece. And Reiko, you just sort of stay there keeping us together.
Yeah, basically the part and the key changes and remain the same, but bigger. And
in other words, you're playing what Schubert basically wrote.
Yes.
And Kaisa and I are the derangement part.
That's correct.
Yeah. That fits our personalities. So let's show you what we mean. Here is Michael Ching's version of Schubert's Sei mir gegrüßt from the cycle Arrangements and Derangements, Interpretations of Schubert, performed by the ARK Trio.
So
And that was Sei mir gegrüßt from Michael Ching's Arrangements and Derangements, Interpretations of Schubert, performed by Reiko Uchida, pianist, Kaisa William Olson, cellist, and me, Allison Charney, soprano, and together we are the ARK Trio. Let's talk about Trout. One of my favorite parts of Trout is simply the way you wrote the title of the piece. Do you remember how you wrote the title of the piece?
The
piece is
title.
called Die Forelle, which is a German, Die is just an article meaning the, and Forelle means trout.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Die Forelle is spelled in German, D-I-E, and then Forelle, Die Forelle. And Michael has capitalized the first word, D-I-E, in all caps. So if you're an English-speaking audience, you perhaps might see it as Die Forelle.
One twist to it is that he, from the trout song, he took the part of the poor fish that is hooked, and he makes me be the fly rod who goes out, and the cat is trying to catch the fish, and then the poor trout dies.
Well, that's a giveaway. there's a spoiler.
Sorry.
Kaisa, aka the spoiler William Olson.
This was kind of that fun kind of pun. It's like Die, trout, die, forella. Because that's really, it turns out what happens in this poem, and as I mentioned with the famous Schubert Trout Quintet, it's all just jolly stuff, and it just sounds like, there's this sort of slithery figure that the cello does, or in the arrangement, derangement, it's kind of I don't know, it's sort of a trout slipping through a brook happily, and that's what we think, but, the whole narrative is that it's not too good for the trout.
I will admit, never had I considered it until I saw your deranged version of the Forella, Die Forella.
That's the funny thing about a lot of art song, the disturbing thing about, not this, disturbing is too strong, but the odd thing about art song is that it can seem just sort of pretty and harmless because, the words are going by in some language that you only understand a small percentage of as an audience member. And so the impression it gives is not complete until you really understand the text.
So one of the things that I've really made part of the mission is this idea of breaking down the traditional barrier between a classical music artist and their audience, because I find it such a bummer. I think it stands in the way of people understanding that they don't need to come to it with anything other than their life. They don't need to have learned anything specific in order to get something out of the experience. And I think there's this facade that has been built around it, and this whole, I don't know, encumbrance around it that does not help anybody and doesn't serve the art and doesn't serve the audience. And so picking away at it in any way, including pointing out the fact that this text is not really great for the poor little trout, and yet the music is just so bubbly, as if everything's just dandy. I just think that it fits perfectly with this vision that I've had of breaking down that wall. So here we are, Die Forella from Michael Ching's Arrangements and Derangements, Interpretations of Schubert, performed by the ARK Trio.
In einem Büschlein hell, da schob sie frohe ein, die launische Forelle vor Edelwind und Wein. Ich stand am Meerestall und sah in süßer Ruhe des bunten Fischleins Ball im klaren Bächlein zu, des bunten Fischleins Ball im klaren Bächlein zu. It's a song about a trout. La 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 la, a song about a trout. The music is so bubbly, like water in a brook. It takes a nasty turn when you have a second look. The story turns quite dark when you understand the words. Sorry to wreck it for you, but here's the truth of it. A fisherman is watching from by the shore. He meets his fly, he screws his rod past the line. And the trout is hooked and struggles bravely, but soon it is caught and reeled in. This ending's not so happy, especially for the trout. This ending's not so jolly, especially for the trout. The narrator's rooting for the fish. But it dies at the end.
That was Die Forella from Michael Ching's Arrangements and Derangements, Interpretations of Schubert. I will say my children, it is definitely one of their all-time favorite pieces now. Not the Schubert, but the Ching. Let's talk about Rastlose Liebe. Rastlose Liebe is a piece of Schubert that you arranged for the ARK Trio, meaning for soprano, cello, and piano to play. Normally it would be performed by a singer and a pianist.
As I recall, you were the one, did you say you sang Rastlose Liebe very early in your career, like in high school or something like that?
In high school, my first voice teacher, Jane Campbell, really took me under her wing, and she made me do competitions when I was in, I guess, 11th grade. And Rastlose Liebe is the piece that I won competitions with right and left. So it was really one of the very first pieces I knew. And I did think at this point in my career, it would be interesting to resurrect it and see what it felt like all these years and all this lifetime later. Reiko.
Yes.
To me, this is just the most frenetic and wild piano part. You always play it as though it's just nothing for you, but tell us if there are any challenges for you with this piece.
I was just trying to stay afloat, to not get lost in all the notes. It goes by really quickly. And at the same time, it's a little bit different now, but I'm trying not to drown out the cello and the soprano. A lot of notes. I think those are the main challenges.
I suppose now that's a silver lining of playing in quarantine, is that we can adjust the volume level of each part as needed. But it is, I'm quite sure, knowing Reiko as I do, that as she's playing, listening to us in her ear, that she's probably being just as perfectly sensitive as she is when we're all doing it live together, because she knows no other way. Kaisa, is this a frenetic part for you as well?
It's a real cello part, I think. It feels really cello, how do you say that in English? Celloistic.
How do you say it in Swedish?
Cellistisk.
I like it. It's better in Swedish. All right, let's give this one a whirl. This is Rastlose Liebe from Michael Ching's Arrangements and Derangements, Interpretations of Schubert, written for us, the ARK Trio. And that was Rastlose Liebe from Michael Ching's Arrangements and Derangements, Interpretations of Schubert, performed by us, the ARK Trio. I so appreciate your friendship over all these years, and I so greatly appreciate your beautiful music.
Some really bad things have happened and we're going through right now, and instead of shrugging our shoulders as a society, we're instead reacting with protest and dismay and coming together for change. And so I think in a way, this is going to result in an improvement in society, even though we're going through a tough time to get there.
Well, you know, it's good for me to have friends who are such optimists, Michael. You keep me grounded, keep my head in the right direction. Next time in person.
Absolutely, let's do it.
Reiko and Kaisa, it has been such a pleasure getting to visit with you today. I look forward to continuing my discussion with Kaisa and Reiko in the second part of episode 3 of Season of Hope, when we visit with composer Kim D. Sherman and perform some selections from her beautiful song cycle, Prairie Diary.